Hello, Jordan. How are you doing?
Good, good. How are you, Taylor?
I'm doing amazing. So, for those who are tuning in, this is another episode of the Happy Doc podcast. And today I have Jordan Frey, the Prudent plastic surgeon. And I love the name. So, before we get to anything, how did you get that name?
I was just trying to think of something alliterative or something kind of catchy. So I'd gone through a few different ones. Initially, I thought because my whole thing is, I'm starting and I made a bunch of mistakes and I'm trying to, get better and sort of right my financial ship. So I thought the poor plastic surgeon, because you don't usually think of a poor plastic surgeon. But then I was like, who's going to want to read from someone who's admitting that they're poor? So I thought prudent was like a good alliterative version of that.
Awesome, awesome. So, Jordan, what got you started into medicine, or what got your head thinking to go down this road?
Yeah, it is, all through my life, I loved, science, but I went to college and I was playing a sport, playing baseball, and I just did business because that was sort of the easiest to fit in the schedule. But like the first business class I took, I really hated it. And so then, I kind of thought, well, what did I like in, high school and stuff? And I was really into chemistry and biology. So I switched my majors. I ended up to stop playing baseball, and then I had to make a decision like, do I want to become a chemist? And I just didn't see that as the most exciting thing. And so I thought kind of the I don't know, fun, it seemed fun to me, the fun kind of practical application of science is medicine. And so I got interested in it and just never looked back. Loved it ever since.
Absolutely, absolutely. And so you decided to go pre-med. You took your exams and everything. You
Yeah.
took the prereqs. You went through the process, and
Hmm.
then you went to medical school.
Yeah.
Did you always know you were going to go into plastics, or what kind of happened that set you over to that path?
Yeah, no, it's totally unexpected. Before I really learned what plastics is. I kind of had what I think most people think of, which is sort of the aesthetic surgeon, which is, obviously one component of what a plastic surgeon is. But I sort of was like picturing that Beverly Hills plastic surgeon. And I told my family, I was like, that's one thing I'm not going to do. I'm not going to do plastic surgery. And of course, that just doomed me into doing that. But so I the third year and I was kind of where we had to choose. And I was kind of thinking I was just going to do general surgery. And I had an elective. And for some reason earlier in the year, I had selected to do like neonatology. And then like a week before, I was kind of like, that just doesn't seem as interesting to me as I guess I thought it was then. And the only other elective open was pediatric plastic surgery. So I thought, well, it's surgery. I'll go and see. And so I ended up doing that for 2 weeks, and I was just blown away by what plastic surgeons actually do. And I was seeing them, do complex craniofacial surgery and cleft lip and palate, and then I was seeing, the reconstructive stuff, kind of more what I do now, which is microsurgery and, doing free flaps for trauma or head and neck cancer or breast cancer. And I just was totally, taken, and I decided I was going to do it, and I applied and got in, and have just been loving it.
That's amazing. Now it's a long path, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
to specialize in plastics, how many years is it post medical school? How much training and residency?
Yeah, it depends. It's a lot. So there's a few different ways. There's an integrated pathway, which is what I ended up doing, which is 6 years. And then I did a year-long microsurgery fellowship, so 7 years of training. Then another path is you can do a full 5 years of general surgery, and then you do 3 years of plastics. And then if you do a fellowship on top of that, that could be 9 years. So it's definitely a long road.
Wow, that is a lot of years. And
Yeah.
I know we're going to be definitely heading into this conversation. One of the things we're going to talk about, of course, that we discussed a little bit earlier is financial well-being and
Hmm.
how that's really important for physicians.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
I can imagine, as you're saying that, 6, 7, 8, 9 years of training and residency, you are extremely delaying the process of getting your finances in order and obviously getting that attending level salary. Can you start to paint the picture of like what your process was in your early beginnings in finances and how that developed?
Yeah, yeah, it wasn't all that long ago. It's, we're recording this, I guess, September 17th. So it was like probably April or May. I can't remember exactly, but just, like 5 months or so ago that this all really started. And the reason was because I was getting to the end of my training, the end of my fellowship, and I always sort of had this, notion, or everyone kind of says like, oh, you're going to become an attending, like everything's going to be fine, it'll all work itself out. And that's usually just people who are not, really there's a lot of people that weren't in the field of medicine who are telling me that, like my family, just because that's what they assumed, that all doctors are just going to end up being financially okay. And then it was also a lot of attendings and people who kind of were past the stage, or whatever their circumstances may have been different. And I realized that just wasn't going to happen for me. I was getting towards the end, and even though I was going to get a huge salary jump, I still had a huge amount of loans, like over $400,000 of loans. I had credit card debt, and I didn't really have a plan of attacking that. And so my wife and I sat, and we just said, okay, we have to kind of face this head on. And we had both sort of shied away from thinking about that, and I really kind of buried our heads in the sand. I mean, not proud to admit that, but that was our strategy for 6-7 years. And we said, we need to really look our mistakes in the face, and we were scared to do that. But once we did it, we sort of felt empowered, because we were like, okay, now we know like how bad it is, and we can actually take steps to fix it and to get on the right track. And that's what we've done. And that's what I call like financial well-being, even though, I still am $400,000 in debt, and I still have credit card debt that we're paying off aggressively. But we have a plan. And because we have that plan, I feel like our financial well-being just went way, way higher. And I found like I just became a better surgeon, a better doctor because of that. And my overall well-being improved because I had that aspect sort of more in control.
Yeah, that's great. And obviously I understand that a lot of people, like you said, bury your heads into the sand, and you don't think about it. You expect at some point you're gonna receive that, bundle of money, so to speak, every couple weeks or every month, and it's gonna work itself out. And in your story,
Yeah.
like you said, that's not the case. Like, you have to start to think about what's coming in, what's coming out. You have to have a plan in mind and all of those things. So I think this will be a great segue into what we wanted to talk about, which is financial well-being. So obviously, it's not just for physicians, it's for professionals, it's for anyone who's working. Really, it's really important to understand what it takes to be financially well, and to, like you said, you don't necessarily have to have all your ducks in a row, but you certainly want to be able to know what the heck you're doing and how to have the plan in place, so you know how to attack. So can we talk about what it really means to start to tease this out and become financially well?
Yeah, absolutely. I think like the first step for us obviously was, looking at our situation as a whole, which meant like looking at our mistakes. And that was even things as simple as, really determining how much debt are we truly in terms of our student loans, and things that can be uncomfortable. I know I did, and I know a lot of, people have shared with me that they do the same thing. During residency, I just did deferral or forbearance every year on my loans. And so once a year, I just sort of like would close my eyes and fill out the forms, and like try to pretend like, those massive numbers weren't looking back at me. So I think just looking at what your situation actually is gives you a ton of power, because then, the first step is, if you're digging a hole, is to stop digging, and then you can start climbing out. You can't just say, oh, I want my net worth to be, I just want my net worth to be zero again. You can't, you gotta crawl before you walk, before you run, kind of thing. And so I think doing that, and then like just getting educated, just reading some books. And, I thought like the idea of managing your own finances was impossible, something that like, you needed a formal education to do, that only these sort of like professional advisors could do. And that's just not the case. Just from, now I've read a ton of books, but after, we chose 3 books, my wife and I, to read at the same time. So she would read one, I would read another, and we would switch, and then we would talk about them. And just from that, we started managing our own finances, just because we learned about how to invest and how to save, and really just kind of how to manage your money and your life.
And that's a really, great point that you make there. So you obviously wanted to, not just bury your head into the sand anymore.
Mm-hmm.
You wanted to take a look at the reality of your situation. Like you said, your number before was like 400,000 or whatever it was plus.
Yeah.
That's a scary number, right?
Yeah.
And especially on a resident salary. So I don't think a lot of people realize that, residents make somewhere between like 40 to maybe 60 at the top when you're trying to, when you're training longer time. And that's not including the taxes. And that's after already deferring a lot of time. So you mentioned some books and learning really the basics. What resources did you use?
Yeah, the first one I did was the White Coat Investor, his first book. I forget the exact, subtitle, but that's like a fantastic one. And it's short. It took us like a few days to read, and it kind of just hits at the major points, especially for physicians, because it goes over, like getting life insurance, disability insurance, and then kind of budgeting, and then the basics of investing. And it really kind of hits every point. The next one we read was The Millionaire Next Door, which is like a classic one. And that's the White Coat Investor was a little more action oriented, whereas The Millionaire Next Door was sort of more philosophical. But that one completely, flipped our sort of conceptions on their head, because, the basis of that book is that, the millionaires in America, they're not the people driving around in, Mercedes or now Teslas or whatever, and they're not the people necessarily living in these huge mansions and things. They tend to be people, like the most common car they drive is like a Ford Explorer, and they tend to be small business owners, and because they're living, they're living below their means, and they're saving and they're investing, and that's how you build wealth. It's, you have how much you make and you have how much you spend, and that gap you invest. And so you can either, make more or save more. So that's a really great book. Another one in that vein is Rich Dad Poor Dad, which is like a classic, and we read, and that has sort of a real estate tilt to it, but it's also just sort of about how wealth works. And you want to, he gives, it's Robert Kiyosaki's the author, but he gives like the super simple definition of, in life you can buy things that are assets or things that are liabilities. And assets, very simply, are things that put money in your pocket, and liabilities take things out of your pocket. And we were like, all we had was liabilities, essentially. And now we're buying assets. Like we just bought our first rental property, and that's another good philosophical book of just kind of how to think about money and wealth. And again, it's not that money and wealth is the end all be all, but of course, you want to have a foundation to your life to feel secure, so that you can, be the best version of yourself in every other part of your life. If you're constantly in debt, or, if you're a doctor that's trying to see more patients at a frantic rate to try and, get more compensation stuff, to me, that's not being a happy doc. That certainly wouldn't be happy for me. And that's what, I want to avoid.
You get brownie points there for using happy
doc.
Yeah,
I thought you'd like that.
I'm just kidding. No, so I think you bring up some great points, and obviously having a financial foundation is so important. You mentioned these three books: The White Coat Investor, The Millionaire Next Door, Rich Dad Poor Dad. And after reading those books, what were some obvious, and I'm asking this question for a specific reason, because a lot of people aren't exposing themselves. What are some like obvious mistakes that after you're reading these books, you're like, oh, I can fix this. I can fix this. Like, what were sort of the mindset shifts or the actions or behaviors that you changed after reading these books?
Yeah. The most obvious one is like we were spending exactly up to our salary, to our earnings every month. And again, I was a resident fellow. My wife was a PhD student, and we had 2 kids living in New York City. So there were a lot of expenses, but we didn't pay ourselves first, meaning we didn't set anything aside at first. And we could have even just, every month set aside, $100 or something, and we would have been just fine, but instead we found something else to spend that $100 on, because it was just there. And we were just sort of intuitively doing that. So I think, it seems so simple now, but like just paying yourself first and just saving, the concept of having a set savings rate. Like I believe like every doctor should, end up retiring very comfortable. All you need to do is save 20% and invest that in like index funds or, bond index funds, stock index funds, that kind of thing. And when you retire, you'll be fine. But we were saving 0%. Now we're saving 41%. And the scary thing is, like I said, we were sort of learning about all this right towards the end of my training when I was about to transition to be an attending. And we 100% would have, if we had not learned this, I would have increased my salary, whatever it was, like 8 times, 9 times, whatever. And we would have just spent up to our salary. We would have, because that's just what we were used to doing. And that's what it seemed like we were doing. And we'd probably be driving super fancy cars, and we would, be in an even bigger house, which we don't need. And we would still be, just basically living paycheck to paycheck. And that's the scary thought. And I think there's a lot of people in that position that just because they aren't exposed to it like I was. And that's kind of what I'm trying to do and to share, because it seems so obvious now, but it completely wasn't just 6 months ago to me.
Yeah, I mean, I know this from practice as well, because I was kind of in the same position. I'm very lucky to have been exposed to a lot of this stuff a little bit earlier. As you know, I'm sure, like the habits and the actions and the behaviors and the mindset, all of that stuff plays a role. And you should learn it actually, like now is the time, like not necessarily as a medical student, but as a resident, it's definitely the time. Or as you're starting to make money, it's definitely the time to learn the foundation before you make a lot of money, because as you know, more money, more problems.
Exactly.
If you don't know how to manage it. And so I understand that like now, because I've read enough, and you obviously have read enough as well. And I think it's just, again, like these are great tips. Like a lot of people, like, I remember this when I was in high school, when I got like my first like major job, and I was making like $600 or $700 a week. What did I use it on? I used it all on clothes and food and whatever.
Yeah.
And it didn't, it would never, obviously at that age, you don't think about savings, you don't think about investments, you don't think about this stuff. But when you start to have debt, or you start to develop your life and you start to move forward, and you can make some money, especially for doctors who've taken on a ridiculous amount of loan debt, if you don't have the skills, you can just get buried. And so I love the tips that you're giving. Pay yourself first, save, you gave a percentage, but save X percent, whatever that's going to be comfortable and work for you. 20% was the number you gave. Invest that into, stuff. And we'll talk about investments shortly, and do not spend at the level of your salary. Those are awesome tips. Yeah. I think that's fantastic. So, when you say pay yourself first, I just want to go back to that point for a second. What do you mean by pay yourself first? Like, what does that mean exactly?
Yeah, to me, it's like, you have a set amount of savings that you want, and that money is like gone out of your checking account before you even see it. Because a checking account is like a slush fund, like it's just there, and if it's there, you'll spend it. So, for me, that means, I forget the exact numbers now, but whatever I contribute, to my retirement plans at work, that's out obviously before I even get the paycheck. But I have like immediate transfers set up for, we have a certain amount of savings that we're putting towards, our kids' college, their 529 accounts, that gets taken out automatically. We have a set amount of money going towards our real estate investing. That's an automatic transfer to a different account right away. So things like that. So the money we're seeing in our checking account is really the money that we, have to spend. And I forgot to mention, a huge part of that is what's getting paid to, our credit cards, and also to our loan debt is coming out automatically. So that money we're seeing is really, there for, or that's really the money we have to spend, I guess. It's not, because sometimes if you say, oh, I want to pay, $6,000 towards a loan this month, but you just leave it in the checking account, then you can kind of go like, oh, well, I kind of like want this, and I'll just pay a little bit less this month. And you can see how that's a slippery slope. So it's just almost just like protecting yourself from yourself.
Yeah, I really want to actually focus in on this because I read I think I Will Teach You to Be Rich by Ramit
Yeah.
Sethi. I'm sure you've heard of him as
Yeah.
well. And he really focuses on automatic transfers and payments
Hmm.
because unfortunately, in some ways, humans are really stupid, and
Hmm.
we will make really dumb mistakes because we all have different desires and things we want to do. And usually our spending habits are really influenced by the numbers we're seeing, right? And like what's in our account. So can we go a little bit deeper? Like, let's talk about like automatic, like how did automatic transferring and like setting that up, how did that impact like your decision making and all of that?
Yeah, it definitely did. I can remember even going back to when I was in residency, and there would be like certain times where for whatever reason we had sort of saved better a week or a month before, and I would see like, oh, our checking account is like looking a little bit better, and I'd be like, oh, we have like some more cushion. And then like without even realizing it, our spending would just increase, like we would whatever, just even activities, we weren't doing it on purpose, but just when a decision came up like, oh, can should we do this or shouldn't we, just intuitively in my brain I would be more likely to be like, oh yeah, sure, we should do it. And that's again because that money was just sitting there. It should have been spent on something else, but it wasn't. And so it really has changed, and it's awesome to see like we have our account that's for a new car that in 3 years we want to buy um, you know a new car, and so we just see with every paycheck that's just increasing and increasing. And even just over the past few months since we've set that goal, it's at a substantial amount, and it wouldn't be otherwise. And so that's the sort of positive feedback that comes with it. And then you realize after really after the first few paychecks and stuff, you're like, my life hasn't changed. It's not like I haven't got any more restrictive or anything. Life went on, and I was just as comfortable and just as happy, because probably that stuff you're spending it on, you weren't spending intentionally. That concept of sort of just spending on the things that will make you happy. So it really has helped a ton.
Yeah, I mean, and I think it's really important. Again, like you said, like let's say your paycheck, let's just say it's $1,000,
Hmm.
right? It's very different if you get the whole sum of 1,000, or you set up sub savings accounts or separate savings accounts for specific goals, right? So let's say a
Yeah.
wedding's coming up, or the car, the new car is coming up. You're able to shunt the money away before you even consider that you need to use it. I'm
Exactly.
curious because not all banks let you do this, right? Like, if you
Hmm.
don't mind, like, what bank are you using that allows you to create these different accounts?
Yeah, we have Chase, which actually it's nice because they have like an auto save, feature and stuff, and you can set up all these things. It was pretty easy. We have it even though we moved in New York City. Obviously, there's a Chase like every block, but we moved to Buffalo where there's no Chases, but we still kept that because we just like that feature.
I mean, it's really powerful. I have Ally, which is like on the
Yeah.
online as well, and Ally is a little bit different. It's interesting. Basically, it's like super easy, and you can just create multiple savings accounts, and then
Hmm.
you can just title it. So like I have
As
like
each.
my true yeah, I have like my true savings, and then I have my investments, investment account, and then I have like little sub savings like vacation or what have you. And so I'm sure it's very similar. You can like title them
Yeah.
in Chase as well.
Yeah. Exactly. Exactly.
And the thing is like the conversation we're having, if we talked about this like a year ago, maybe I would be completely lost. So
Yeah.
it
Same. Yeah.
and if you don't know, like, this is why I think it's like really important that we're like teasing out some details here, because if you
Hmm.
don't know this stuff, you will screw yourself,
Yeah.
and you don't even know it. And it's just it's so interesting to me. You can take two people with the exact same amount of like cash flow, and they'll have tremendously different lives with just a
Yeah.
few tweaks, and it's
Hmm.
crazy.
Yeah. No, absolutely. It is. It's one of those things that it's like once you learn it, it's kind of like that, you know, glass shatters and you're like, man, how did I ever think any differently? But it's so easy to, and there's so many people who just aren't exposed because our the reality is, our culture is one of consumerism, and there's so many, you know, forces out there kind of just promoting that, like, okay, you make money in order to buy stuff and to buy, status symbols. And we're all guilty of that. I'm not saying that I'm like, above that or something, but you have to, once you become aware of that, you sort of are able to say, okay, like, do I really want that, or do I just feel like I need that because others seem to want it?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So no, I'm glad we're kind of digging into like some of these details here.
Yeah.
So let's say this, right? So our listeners, they're taking this all in. They're like, okay, I'm going to read these books. I'm going to start to develop my savings accounts and start to, develop this plan. Let's go through like some of the steps. Like obviously there's like a natural order of things that you should probably take care of in a specific way. So what are sort of the, like what, and everyone's a little bit different. Like I might have an order of operations that, but a lot of people don't even have a money system. And I know that I'm sure you do, and I do as well. But like, what is your order of operations when you receive, let's say 10K? What is your order of operations of like, how would you start to fill in the different areas of your life, or like, what would you do first?
Yeah. So I have, on my blog, I published it. Like my wife and I wrote out and have a complete financial plan. And the first thing on there is like our financial priority list. And so it's on there and anyone can go see, but like we have number one was pay off debt with greater than 10% interest. So like that's really, consumer credit card debt. And number two was establish an emergency fund, like 3 to 6 months of expenses in the event that, something crazy like COVID happens. And then there's, pay off kind of medium interest debt, 3 to 8%. That's our, student debt and stuff. Max out my retirement plan to get the match, max out my wife's retirement plan to get her match. Then it's invest in real estate for us. And then kind of going down the rung, there's more and more like contribute to college funds, taxable investing, and or I guess Roth backdoors before that, then taxable investing, and then paying off really low interest rate debt, like less than 3%.
Yeah, so let's talk about that, because I have a different order of operations, but I also like, again, I think it's also dependent on like your goals and what you're trying to achieve, and like how early you're into the game versus later. But like, so traditionally what I thought is, so you're gonna tackle that high interest rate, like above 10%, right? Because in essence there's really nothing that will ever return more than that usually with guarantee, right? The savings account makes a lot of sense, right? You're gonna start to develop your 6 month to 1 year, whatever timeline you're looking at for your savings account. Traditionally, I've heard that at that point, it's you're filling up your 401k or 403b, what have you, and you're doing the Roth, and then you might tackle whatever the next tax bracket or loans or what have you. But real estate is pretty early for you, and that was something that I know we wanted to talk about. I'm super curious. By the way, like this is an area I haven't really done too much work in. I know there's a lot of advantages to real estate, but I would love for us to kind of hash out like, why is real estate? And again, this might be a little different now with COVID. But like, why is real estate like higher on your list as the next order of things that you're going to work on?
Yeah, when we initially made the plan, it wasn't, because we didn't know as much about it or really anything about it, hadn't been exposed to it. But then we did we kind of randomly got exposed to it through Rich Dad Poor Dad. And then, I saw a semi-retired MD, they're a married couple that invest in real estate. And I saw a talk that they gave online that I just sort of randomly came across. And so then we started saying like, this kind of keeps coming up. It doesn't really seem like it's something that we're going to do, because it just seems like, such a big thing to tackle, but we might as well learn about it. And then the more we learned, we were like, we can do this. Other people, other doctors have done this. Why can't we? And it's really, I think, like an incredible vehicle because it offers a number of different advantages. Now, I'll start by saying, there's a lot of different ways to invest in real estate. The way that we do is by buying properties that we then rent out so that, the renters pay our mortgage, and then they pay all the expenses, and then they pay even more above that goes into our pocket as cash flow. So we're making money that way. And then we're also making money because they, like I said, they're paying off our mortgage. So, we're getting equity in that manner. And then there's also huge tax benefits, especially for physicians. And without getting too into the weeds, there's something you can qualify for, which is called, excuse me, real estate professional tax status, which essentially, once you get that, you can claim, huge losses on your real estate because of something called depreciation. So even though this property that we have every month is putting money in our pocket, according to the government, real estate loses value every year. So even though, again, it's putting money in our pocket, on paper, it looks like it's losing money. So those losses, once you have this special tax status, can be used to shelter your income. And we don't have that yet. Our goal is for in 2021 for my wife to have that tax status. But for instance, if I let's just say average doctor has $200,000, they make $200,000 a year or whatever, and with their real estate, they're able to write off from depreciation $100,000. Well, then they only have to pay taxes on $100,000 of their doctor income. And that's a huge difference. Like if their effective tax rate is 25% or something, that's, tens of thousands of dollars that are back in their pocket. So
wait, let me, I want to clarify this for a second, because that's like a crazy idea to me. So let's say you have a $400,000 home, you're making payments towards whatever, right? It's depreciated to $350,000.
Yeah.
You're telling me that if I made $200K, because my home lost $50K, I can say I essentially made $150K, and I'm taxing the $150.
Exactly. Yeah. If you have this special tax status, if you don't, it has to block. What's that?
Is it hard to get that status?
If you want it, no. It's like one of those things. When you first hear about it, you're like, how am I going to do that? But if you decide you want it, then you're going to get it. And with that advantage, it's worthwhile. So the way you get it is so let's say, my wife works. Well, let's say for the sake of argument, she didn't work. She stayed at home and took care of the kids. She would then need to qualify. She would have to spend over a year, 750 hours on the real estate. That doesn't mean she's like swinging a sledgehammer and stuff like that. She could be looking for properties, analyzing properties, supervising contractors that are doing repairs, collecting rent, going over the spreadsheets each month, things like that. If you have another job, like, if it was me, and let's say I worked, I don't know, I'm just making up numbers, but 1,000 hours a year as a doctor or something, then I would have to work 1,001 on real estate in order to qualify. So that's where it's harder. But what I've heard a lot of doctors doing, again, it's not going to be my approach because my wife, wants to go for it, and it just works out better in her situation. But you can actually kind of find that break-even point of like, okay, if I go back to half time and focus the rest of my time on real estate and get that real estate professional tax status, I'm going to shelter my income such that what I make is actually more than if I was just working full-time as a physician and paying all those taxes.
It's like a very interesting idea. So I'm just trying to summarize this.
Yeah.
So there's a real estate professional tax status that someone can get. They need a certain hourly requirement that they've hit in a year. And once they've hit that requirement, they can get that status, which then allows you to essentially, house or use the depreciation cost to essentially reduce the amount you have to pay in taxes.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's a really powerful thing. But even without that, because sometimes people, their physicians are like, I don't necessarily want to cut back, and achieving that many hours will be tough. Even without that, real estate has like, it's worthwhile. Definitely without that. Those tax advantages are huge, but just the fact that you can have something that every month is putting money in your pocket and also is increasing your net worth by your renters paying off your mortgage is huge. And then, with our strategy, the real estate market is a lot like the stock market in the sense of, in the short term, it's very volatile, but over the long term, it tends to increase.
Mhm.
So, we buy and hold properties. So, we're not flipping, or we're not looking to sell our property in a year or something like that. And if we hold on to it for, 5, 10 years, it's going to go up. Again, we're not banking on that, but that's kind of like, the same argument with index funds. You're just sort of, that's the safest bet.
Yeah.
So that's another way that you can make money. And then those gains you make can be tax-free when you exchange it for a new, bigger property, which then is going to put more cash in your pocket. And it kind of just really snowballs.
So,
So yeah,
so real estate, money you make on real estate, essentially you can reinvest into other properties and you don't have to pay taxes on it,
exactly. Yeah.
which is pretty, I mean, that's very impressive because, I mean,
Yeah.
as you know, again, like, that's not as, immense if it's smaller properties or less money. But when you're talking about, hundreds of thousands of dollars or millions of dollars worth of properties, the tax advantages there start to become ridiculous.
Yeah, exactly. No, it's huge. And like,
Yeah.
and that's how you get, because people initially, we bought a duplex. It's not like we're, real estate barons or anything now. It's just a duplex. And then, it was like 175,000. And we can wait, and we'll get cash in our pocket, and we'll get people paying off our mortgage. And then we can sell that, and then tax free, we can use all of that for a down payment on, a $600,000 10-unit property or something. And then you just exponentially keep growing. And that's really the great thing about it.
Yeah, I mean, the math on, I mean, if you're not a math person, it might not make sense to you, but like my mind is going kind of crazy right now because that is
Yeah.
a ridiculous advantage. Obviously
Yeah.
it's not the
Yeah.
scope of this conversation for us to dig into all of the ways you could use real estate, because that's like
Right.
a,
Yeah.
I know it's a crazy topic, but what resources have you used to educate like, what have you been using? Books? Have you been going online? Like, what resources are you using to educate yourself on
Yeah.
a lot of the real estate tips?
Yeah. I use a lot. If for people interested, definitely first book to read, Rich Dad Poor Dad. That again, it sort of philosophically lays out, why real estate is such a great investment, and motivated us to get into it. Um, the best, like, sort of step-by-step how-to book, and it also goes into mindset. It's a fantastic book. It's called The Millionaire Real Estate Investor. It's by Gary Keller. And then we do read a lot of blogs. I think the best one is semiretiredmd.com. And they have a course that my wife and I took and loved a lot. Um, Another excellent resource is his name's Dr. Cory Fawcett, Fawcett. He's written a number of books. He also just came out with a course about real estate investing that we took as well. Those are in my mind like the best ones. Those were the main ones we used.
I mean, and it's really important because, one of the reasons I want to focus on this is, the happy doctor, the idea of not just happy physicians, but anyone who wants to live a happy life.
Yeah.
Again, if you don't know these tricks or these ways of developing wealth, you're going to get nickeled and dimed on every part of the process. And of course, taxes are important and we want to do
Mm-hmm.
that. But at the same time, we also want to make sure that we're developing our own ability to have a wealthy life and give to people in the way we want to, as opposed to being controlled because we're stuck in our finances.
Yeah.
It's a crazy world. And again, it's, in this case with money, knowledge is power, and the application of the knowledge will exponentially, with a compounding effect, just change everything. So I think this is a really powerful conversation. I don't want to go again too in depth, but the other side to it that we didn't hit is investing. So what are, do you have any like general guidelines for investing? Are you totally in real estate, or are you kind of diversified in some investing as well?
No, yeah, we also invest. So we're sort of like hybrid model, that's everyone's always like either real estate or index, but we're kind of in the middle. Or real estate or stocks, which I just gave away my strategy. But and that's basically it in terms of like stock investing. Very boring. Like I truly believe in sort of like the market efficiency, and just there's all these people on Wall Street with super powerful computers trying to find all of these sort of like mismatches in terms of value of stocks and what the next best thing is. And I definitely don't think I can do that better than them, and I don't even think they can do a good job of it. So I just try to invest in the whole market basically, and just let time do its thing. So again, it's all in one of the posts on my blog. I have my asset allocation and everything. I'm trying to remember it off the top of my head. That's how much it's just kind of set it or forget it. But it's 80% stocks, 20% bonds, and then the stocks are split up between like some international and US. But it's a pretty basic one, and I'm just content to kind of let time do its thing. And if the market like completely crashes, then we'll have worse things to worry about than our money.
Right. Well, that's the thing. That's the argument, right? Like if you truly believe that the entire market's going to crash when you're in index funds, then we're going to be screwed anyways.
Yeah, it's going to be apocalyptic. So
exactly. Yeah. I mean, it's a terrible thing to say, but like, what else are you going to do? I guess you could hedge, like the other guest I had on, he's been hedging his because he's not sure what's going to happen. He's been hedging slightly using crypto. So like he's been putting like a small, again, this is someone who's already attained financial freedom. So it's a little bit different.
It's different.
But I thought that was really interesting. Are you are you a Vanguard or Fidelity guy, or a different team?
I'm Vanguard. Yeah, I wish I don't have Vanguard through my job. It's actually TIAA, just because they had the best options of all of them. But for my own, I like Vanguard.
Yeah. I also have Vanguard, but I know I just like recently watched a video, like Fidelity has really good like index funds with low like the other thing too, a lot of people don't realize, I mean, again, we're not going to go into the weeds here, but like the cost, I think it's like the cost ratio, or how much they charge you per X amount of dollars that you invest.
Yeah.
And that's also really important. So
yeah, absolutely.
So Dr. Frey, we've been talking about finances. We've been talking about being financially well. I think we've hit a lot of topics here, and you obviously have a great resource as well. But before we get to that, was there anything in this whole conversation that you want to make sure that our listeners really, know about their well-being in terms of finances?
Yeah, I think for me, what I try to pass on to everyone is like, it's not, as a physician, it's not dirty, or it's not taboo to worry or care about your finances, or think about it, or plan for them. I used to think that, and I think there's a lot of people, and especially a lot of maybe some of your attendings or mentors that you're around, that they've sort of dropped the ball a little bit. And a lot of times the excuse for that can become like, well, I didn't go into this for money, or I'm not worried about that, I'm just worried about the patients. But those things aren't mutually exclusive. And I used to think that, and I was totally wrong, because when I started focusing on my financial well-being, I became a much better doctor, because I was able to focus on the patients more, because I wasn't worried about, if I was going to be able to pay our credit card that month, or something like that. So it's not bad to do. And the other thing is, just get started. It's going to seem scary. I procrastinated for so long because I was just scared to look at my mistakes, but just get started, and it's a lot easier than it seems.
Absolutely. No, I love that tip. And I think, at the end of the day, it's going to be that you're going to have to not only learn this knowledge, and you've, again, provided so many resources, but you're going to have to apply the knowledge.
Right.
And I think, just getting started, starting to take those steps, what I didn't realize is it really is compounding. Like the habits, behaviors, and the actions you take, like it does compound, and you better start implementing them when you make some real money. Otherwise, again, you know this from real life experience, that those habits will absolutely either make you or break you if you don't implement them.
Yeah, 100%.
So, Dr. Frey, again, I've had you on for quite some time today. Awesome conversation. I think this is going to be like a great episode for the basics, but also I think, even as we're talking about it, you've given me a little bit more advanced things to look into, and take a look at other areas of investing and all of those things. So I really appreciate your time. That was really great. How do people reach out to you and find you?
Yeah, thanks. I had an awesome time as well. The best way is, anyone can email me. My email is prudentplasticsurgeon@gmail.com. And then my site is www.prudentplasticsurgeon.com. And you can reach me through there as well. But definitely, I'm pretty good at getting back to emails. So definitely any questions, anything I can do, feel free to reach out.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. And that was great. You shared so much. I'm sure we're going to have lots of questions at some point. By the way, if you have any frequent questions or questions that come up, maybe we'll go on for a part 2 just to go a little bit more in depth. But again, this can't be talked about enough because no one's talking about it ever. And
exactly.
There's no other way to learn it, and no one's teaching us these life skills that are really actually going to set you up for success. You're taught all of the clinical knowledge or whatever profession you're in. You're taught that knowledge, but no one's telling you how to free yourself. And no one's teaching you how to open up these options for what you can do in life. And so I think it's just absolutely, again, super important, very important for happiness. So Dr. Frey, thank you so much for being on today. And I hope you had a great time.
Yeah, it was great. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Take care.
You too.